Hi there, and welcome to the Markets UK podcast, giving you 15 minutes of politics, history, comment, and thought. Okay, so the following is not a joke. This is not a joke. One of four men at HBOS who ran, and I quote, an aggressive, high-risk growth strategy that prioritised optimism over prudence, also a quote, is now chief executive at one of Britain's biggest bookmakers, an industry based on the triumph of optimism over prudence. It could be argued that the qualities that betting chain Coral have seen in HBOS former director Andy Hornby would make him more qualified to be a punter than senior management, but that would be to trivialise the issues that surround the report into the malpractice at HBOS that was delivered last week. I thought that I would use two cases to explore the strange world of moral hazard, a term beloved of Sir Mervyn King, the Governor of the Bank of England. The first of these is that of the HBOS 4, whom we will examine in a moment, and the latter is an altogether different contemporary British pariah, the nation's underclass. Recently, Prime Minister David Cameron argued that there was a different type of moral hazard that involved an entire section of society, following the conviction of Britain's most publicised recipient of welfare largesse, Mick Philpot. For those who are not au fait with British tabloid culture, he can best be described as the bastard offspring of Albert Steptoe and Lemmy from Motorhead, for the manslaughter of his 6 children. The two stories have much to tell us about the current sickly state of moral responsibility, especially as it pertains to your money. Firstly, however, HBOS. Last week, a division of the company, the former Bank of Scotland, was found guilty by an FSA investigation of very serious misconduct. That would have led to the collapse of the bank irrespective of the 2008 crash. Amazingly, the only reason why a fine totalling tens of millions of pounds was not levied on HBOS was due to the fact that the taxpayer is now currently supporting it, and the cost would only be borne by the public purse anyway, a situation that's so paradoxical that as I sit here and record this, I struggle really to comprehend it. For years, the bank took a cavalier attitude to bad debt, lent an awful lot to a narrow range of customers instead of spreading risk, and set targets sky high whilst waiting for corporate profits to subsidise poorly performing retail banking. Why did they do all this? Why could they afford to be so reckless and to act as if there were no consequences? Because they knew, before 2008, that there were no consequences, and they knew this long before 2008. They were fully aware that the size of the financial service sector had grown so big that the government would inevitably be forced to bail them out if they ran into serious trouble. This is the moral hazard of which the Governor of the Bank of England speaks. It is an obscurantist term that basically means that there is no disincentive to behave as recklessly as one sees fit. During the last 2 decades of banking deregulation, there was an assumption that the entire business of banking could self-regulate, because why would an industry that had it so good do anything to jeopardise that? Banking would never knowingly harm itself by operating in an irresponsible way, so went the thinking, because banks and other businesses are essentially rational operators in the marketplace. Economists have long since abandoned the idea that man is a rational homo economicus, and yet many have clung to the notion that the institutions he has created are exempt from this critique. Apparently not. The knowledge of the possibility of a taxpayer bailout therefore distorted the decision-making of HBOS directors, leaving them content in the knowledge that there were no consequences to their actions, none that would impinge on them at any rate. As ever with banks, profits are privatised and consequences both nationalised and socialised. The state has been left groaning under the strain of taxpayer guarantees that have now left the Lloyds-owned HBOS able to continue trading. Corporate customers are happy to do business with the Bank of Taxpayer plc, the one corporate entity guaranteed never to go bust. And the collapse in lending and subsequent austerity that followed the bank's antics in 2008 have blighted the lives of millions. In the same week that the findings of the report were revealed, the aforementioned Mr. Philpot took centre stage in British tabloid media for what is likely to be the last time. Beyond the immediate horror of his gruesome crime, the killing of his own children in a ludicrous scheme, setting fire to his own home in a bid to frame an ex-partner and get a larger property, the question about how his lifestyle was financed was raised by the press and by the Chancellor and Prime Minister. The final bill to the taxpayer for the lavish benefits lifestyle of Mr. Philpot was close to £70,000 per annum, owing to the fact that he had sired some 17 children. The purpose of discussing this was not to engage in some tirade about the feckless poor. That argument, for better or worse, has been made by dozens of different newspapers and blogs recently. Instead, it is interesting to explore the Prime Minister's personal reaction to the whole gruesome story. Following the conviction of Philpot and his wife and best friend, Cameron said that there was a lack of any real moral hazard in the trio's lifestyle, implying that people who are heavily subsidised throughout much of their lives do not have to take any kind of responsibility for their actions. Whilst this might be the case, the extent to which this inevitably leads to manslaughter is unclear. The PM seems less focused on the crime in question than the economic circumstances of the perpetrators, which seems to be a uniquely new development in public debates over crime. Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, has, to my knowledge, never been discussed in a similar manner. Interestingly, the court case was concluded in the very same week that the government announced sweeping benefit curbs, and lurid details of shameless Mick's publicly funded existence seeped out, making the nation ill-disposed to anyone who was not showing a Stakhanovite work ethic that week. I may be becoming overly conspiratorial, but if I were planning to slash benefits, I can't think of a better news week to do it in. Philpot was already known to Britain. He had previously appeared as a reality TV figure, almost an ambassador for the underclass, featuring on that great magazine show for the dysfunctional, The Jeremy Kyle Show. He'd also appeared in a programme with former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe, who was suitably appalled by everything he represented. Does the state in its largesse make people irresponsible? In the case of HBOS, almost certainly. The directors of the business seem to have known either instinctively or they were explicitly told long before 2008 that they would be underwritten. The fact that they were operating on this assumption is truly terrifying. It is bad enough that following the financial disaster, banks were bailed out by a reluctant government, but so much worse to contemplate that they were always depending on this. Does the second case tell us anything? Well, yes and no. There are, always have been, and always will be colossally stupid people in the world. This is a given and something we'll all just have to live with. Are some of them subsidised by the rest of us? Yes, some of them are. The majority of claimants, however, are decent and worthwhile people who exist on low incomes and ideally would prefer not to. Statistics recently revealed by the BBC that, on average, benefit claimants have no more children than anyone else. The first case of moral hazard is the one that really affects your wealth and well-being, and the second is simply designed to attract your ire and indignation. But it is a ruse, a ploy to keep the nation's eye off the real game. Don't fall for it. The simple fact, confirmed by the FSA, is that the men at HBOS entrusted with your financial future are not worthy of that trust. And this level of malpractice seems to be so widespread that sensible investors should be keen to seek out alternatives. Markets UK is all about providing that alternative, seeking out ideal, transparent investments that are simple to understand, reliable and based on real-world assets. And if you'd like to explore our range of investment opportunities, visit www.markets-uk.com. So thanks very much for listening, and if you want more information, remember to subscribe to the Markets UK blog RSS newsfeed, or sign up to this YouTube channel and get a regular diet of politics, information, economics and insight. My name's Nick Shepley and this was the Markets UK podcast.